I wrote How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World to demonstrate that by following unrealistic premises, we give up a tremendous amount of freedom of our own free will, if you can stand the irony. That on our own, without any nudge from the government whatsoever, we managed to give away a great deal of the freedom that we could have. And so I built the book around 3 sections. The second section, if I may begin there, provides specific techniques for freeing yourself from government to a certain extent on your own without any help from the collective, from the Libertarian Party, from anybody else, but just simply doing things that you have control over to make yourself freer from the government or from society or from bad relationships of one kind or another, to satisfy obligations quickly so you can move on to a freer life, things of this sort. And the third part is making enormous changes in your life. Getting out of a bad marriage, getting out of a bad business relationship, getting out of something that you have thought was impossible to get out of and yet you knew was not right for you. Providing whatever techniques I could to help you do this particular thing. But now let's go back to the first part. The first part is a series of traps. And I defined a trap as being something that has 3 elements. First of all, it is an assumption that is widely held by people. Secondly, it is not true. At least it should. I think it's not true if you examine it very closely. And third, it inhibits your freedom. By accepting this premise, this trap, you are giving up a great deal of your freedom. The most basic trap of all is what I call the identity trap, and that is the belief that you should be something other than what you are, that you must be the kind of person that other people expect of you, that you must live up to an ideal that somebody else states. And this can be in big ways, going into the business that your family has set out for you, or it can be in small ways, being in a conversation out here in the foyer and saying what you think people expect you to say rather than what you really believe. I mean, there are huge, huge violations of the identity trap, and there are very trivial ones. But they are the most common kind of trap, and they're at the root pretty much of all the others. But there are others, like the morality trap, and that is believing that you must abide by a code of conduct that has been determined by somebody else rather than you, and which may not fit your nature at all. There are the government traps, a group of them, among which are the belief that government performs some useful function that you must support. And it's very hard for libertarians to accept the idea of that one. But secondly, the belief that governments can keep you from being free, that because government has this great power, you don't have any power at all, which is not true. A very important trap is the despair trap, as I call it, which is the belief that other people can prevent you from being free, that you can't be free because other people won't let you be free. There's the utopia trap, the idea that you can't be free until society is free, and therefore you have to change society, and that's more important than changing yourself, or not changing yourself, but your relationship to the world and the things that you do. And all of this, there are other traps as well, but they all revolve around these 3 basic elements, and that is that they are widely held beliefs that on closer examination will not stand up and in some way or other inhibit your own freedom of action so that you are not living the kind of life that you can imagine would be better for you. Now, I begin the book with 3 basic premises in discussing the identity trap. The first is the realization that every individual, by nature, by virtue of being a human being, is pursuing happiness. And what do I mean by happiness? Well, happiness can be defined almost any way that you choose to do so, and you can reach a whole lot of conclusions depending on the way you define it. But really, happiness, I think, is very simple. It is the feeling of well-being, a mental feeling that we get. Now, happiness can come from watching a good movie, happiness can come from making love, happiness can come from reading a good book or listening to good music, happiness can come from doing good works, happiness can come from making $1 million, happiness can come from all different kinds of things. But what they all have in common is that they all give the person who has done this particular thing the feeling of well-being, as opposed to a feeling of discomfort or anxiety or unfulfilledness or whatever it may be. The second premise is that every individual is different, that what will provide happiness for one person will not necessarily provide happiness for another. And of course, this is a very important realization concerning the identity trap. It is why it is the falling into the identity trap that gets your mother to say, if you just live this way, you will be happy. Take it from me, this is what I did. And it worked out perfectly. I'm happy, you don't see me unhappy, so forth and so on. So why can't you do this and be happy too? Because I'm not you, mother. And fortunately, I didn't have a mother like that, but I've seen enough movies about Jewish mothers to know how common it is. But you get the point. The third premise is, and this, I may not have the best terminology in the world, so forgive me if there's a little bit of ambiguity in it, and that is, you control only yourself. Now, by that I mean that really what it comes down to is you cannot think and make decisions for other people. You can only hope to influence other people by creating alternatives that you hope will lead them to choose one thing over another. Now, the alternatives that you create may be sticking a gun in the person's ribs, but he still will decide whether he wants to risk death or obey you or whatever. Or the alternatives that you may create will be offering him money or being a good person, helping that person, whatever it may be. But the point is that he will still make the final decisions. And the irony is that if you think you're going to control others, you wind up being controlled by them. That when you decide that you must control your son, for example, or your business partner, or somebody else, you give up control to that extent over your own life. Because now you must pay attention to everything that person does. Now you must follow that person around and stop him every time he's going to do the wrong thing. Now you must react every time he acts. You must respond in some way, and you are no longer initiating the action in your life. You are now a passive person who is responding to what that person is activating from one thing to the next. And so you have in the process given up control over your own life by trying to control others.
Harry Browne was a libertarian candidate for president in 2000. His book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, is published by Liam Works. They're online at liamworks.com.